Police mistake teen's move for gun. Beat him. Black woman fights back and destroys the department. Hands out of your pockets now. The shout sliced through the late afternoon stillness of the suburban sidewalk. Logan Brooks, a 15-year-old black teen, froze mid-step outside a small convenience store near his school in West Haven, Connecticut. He had just left the store, earbuds still tucked deep in his ears, and Kendrick Lamar thumping in his head. One hand instinctively went into his hoodie pocket to pause the music on his phone. That was the moment everything shattered. The two police officers, Officer Brent Holloway and Officer Mark Dunn, were out of their cruiser in seconds. Holloway reached Logan first, without giving Logan a chance to process the command he hadn't even heard. Holloway slammed the boy against the brick wall of the store. The music cut off when the phone hit the ground and shattered. Logan let out a strangled cry of confusion and fear. "What the hell? I didn't—" "Stop resisting," Dunn barked, wrenching Logan's arm behind his back with such force it made the boy gasp. Knees pressed into his back, elbows jammed into his ribs. Then came the baton, swift, sharp, unforgiving. A crowd started to form. Cell phones went up. A cashier stepped outside, wide-eyed. Logan's backpack had spilled open on the sidewalk, papers fluttering like leaves. A smashed carton of chocolate milk pooled beneath the chaos. "I was just listening to music," Logan whispered hoarsely. Blood dripped from his nose. By the time the siren stopped and Logan was tossed into the back of the police cruiser, his face was bruised, his lips split, and the world as he knew it had turned upside down. That was when Naomi Brooks arrived. She had been at her firm across town, finishing a deposition when her phone lit up with a call from a friend's daughter, one of Logan's classmates, who had been live-streaming the entire ordeal. Naomi didn't scream. She didn't even cry. She stood up, calmly packed her briefcase, walked out of the office without a word, and drove straight to the scene. When she stepped out of her black BMW, dressed in a slate-gray pantsuit, her heels clicking like warning shots on the pavement, the crowd parted. She was composed but coiled. Her deep brown eyes locked on Logan, still hunched in the back of the squad car, blood on his shirt, cuffs on his wrists. Officer Holloway approached her. "Ma'am, this is a police matter. I need you to stand back." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Because it looks like you assaulted a minor who wasn't posing a threat." He was reaching into his pocket, looked like a weapon. "It was a phone," Naomi snapped. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried. "A phone he was using to turn off music you never told him to stop, because he couldn't hear you, because he had earbuds in, which you didn't notice before you slammed him against the wall." Dunn stepped in. "We followed protocol. He fit a description. He fits every description, doesn't he? Black boy. Hoodie. Walking. Existing." Her voice cracked slightly then, the first fracture in the steel mask. But she didn't let it open. She turned to Logan, nodded once to let him know she was here, then to the officers. "Take the cuffs off my son, now." "Ma'am, I don't—" Naomi took a step closer. Her tone dropped. "My name is Naomi Brooks. I'm a civil rights attorney, and what you've just done is not only excessive force but a violation of federal law. So you can either unchain him now, or I'll have an injunction and 2 federal investigators here before sundown." The hesitation on Holloway's face was brief, but it was there. Dunn shifted uncomfortably. Then Holloway muttered something under his breath, clicked the cuffs open, and Logan stumbled into his mother's arms. The crowd cheered softly. Someone whispered, "She's a lawyer? Damn." Naomi held her son, one arm around his shaking shoulders, the other reaching into her purse for a handkerchief to wipe the blood from his face. "I got you, baby," she said. "I got you." Later that night, in the living room of their townhouse, Logan sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Naomi stood by the window, pacing. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Calls from reporters, legal colleagues, strangers offering solidarity. "They thought I had a gun, Mom. I just wanted to pause the song." Naomi knelt in front of him, gripping his hands. "You did nothing wrong, do you hear me? Nothing." He nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the floor. Naomi's jaw clenched. The fire in her belly had turned to an inferno. "We're not going to let them get away with this. We're going to make noise, loud, strategic, legal noise, and we'll burn down the system if we have to." That night, she made her first call. It wasn't to the police chief. It wasn't to Internal Affairs. It was to an old friend at the U.S. Department of Justice. "I need a favor," she said, voice cold and focused. "And trust me, this one's going to shake the pillars." The morning air felt heavy over Grant High School, but inside the main office, a storm was already brewing. Principal Marcia Ellison, a middle-aged white woman with a clipped tone and an unwavering smile, sat stiffly across from Trina Caldwell. Trina's hands were still trembling slightly. She had barely slept. The images of Elijah being beaten down by officers outside the convenience store looped in her mind like a punishment she didn't deserve. But here she was, not as a grieving relative, not as an enraged neighbor, but as Elijah's godmother and legal guardian. And she had questions. "Let me get this straight," Trina said, keeping her voice controlled. "You called the police because a black kid was walking back from practice with his hoodie up and music in his ears." Principal Ellison offered a practiced smile. "There have been complaints from staff and parents. A group of students matching Elijah's description was seen loitering near the gym last week." "Matching his description?" Trina shot back, voice rising. "He's your student. You know his name. You know his face. Don't give me that description nonsense." Ellison shifted uncomfortably. "I understand your frustration, Miss Caldwell, but safety protocols require—" "Don't talk to me about protocols," Trina interrupted, leaning forward. "The protocol ended with my boy in a hospital bed." Outside the office window, students walked the halls, unaware of the storm breaking in the administration wing. Trina glanced at them, then back at Ellison. "I want the security footage," she demanded. "All of it. The school's cameras, the hallway, the front, everything." "I'll have to speak with the district legal team," Ellison replied weakly. "And Ms. Caldwell, I must remind you—" Trina stood. "Remind me of what? That you think a hoodie equals a threat? That his black skin makes him dangerous? Let me remind you, I'm not just a woman with a temper. I'm a civil rights attorney, and I'm not afraid to pull this whole school district apart to get justice." Ellison's smile faltered. That was the first crack. Later that afternoon, Trina stood in Elijah's hospital room, her hand lightly on his wrist. He was sedated, a web of bandages across his face. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside him. Her anger hadn't cooled. It had only transformed into resolve. She was joined by Elijah's mother, Patrice, who had flown in from Chicago overnight. Her eyes were red but dry, her jaw clenched in grief and fury. They hadn't spoken for over 2 years, but this crisis had forced old wounds to the surface. "He always loved walking with his music on," Patrice whispered. "I told him not to wear that damn hoodie, not with the way things are." "He shouldn't have to make himself smaller to survive," Trina replied, her voice tight. "They don't get to teach him fear." Patrice turned to her. "What are we going to do?" Trina's eyes narrowed. "We're going to make them regret they ever laid a hand on him." Just then, her phone buzzed. It was Marcus Denton, an old friend from law school, now an investigative journalist with a reputation for tearing through red tape like tissue. "Marcus," she answered. "You busy?" "For you?" "Never," came his voice through the speaker. "What's the fire?" "I need you to dig, body cam footage, officer history, school board ties, find everything. And I mean everything." There was a pause, then, "This about that teen in Rockford. I saw it on local threads. Videos going viral." "Good. Let it burn," Trina said, her voice steady. "But I want more than outrage. I want evidence." After ending the call, she looked back at Elijah. "You rest now, baby, because when you wake up, they're going to know your name. And they're going to wish they hadn't. Meanwhile, in the Rockford Police Department, Officers Dale Whitman and Brett Hanley sat in silence. The department's internal review board had been called into an emergency meeting. Chief Roman paced the hallway, tension etched deep into his forehead. "Why didn't you follow procedure?" Roman barked once inside the room. "You were issued new guidelines after the Jacobson case." "He reached into his waistband," Whitman replied defensively. "We had no way of knowing." "He had earbuds in," Roman shouted. "You didn't even issue a verbal warning." Hanley muttered. "He looked like he had a weapon." Roman stared at them for a long moment. "You better pray the footage supports that, because right now the mayor's office is breathing down my neck, and a lawyer named Trina Caldwell is gunning for your badges." In another room, the city's PR director was fielding calls from news outlets across the country. The footage of Elijah, his small frame on the ground, the nightstick rising again and again, was playing on a loop. And somewhere deep inside that chaos, a movement was forming. Quiet at first, but powerful, the kind that didn't ask for justice. It demanded it. And Trina Caldwell, with her fury wrapped in reason, was about to lead it. The battle line had been drawn. Trina sat alone in the silence of her home office, staring at her corkboard filled with post-it notes, photographs, and red strings connecting police reports, names, and timestamps. She hadn't slept, not really. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Elijah's face on that pavement again, the blood near his mouth, the way his body jerked under the baton. She heard the panic in his voice, the confusion, the pain. It rang in her skull like a siren. She picked up her phone and hit record. June 5th, 2:47 a.m. Subject, Elijah Matthews. Incident, use of excessive force. Suspect officers Dale Whitman, Brett Hanley. Preliminary findings suggest the boy was reaching for his phone. Officers failed to issue clear warnings. Multiple bystander videos confirm lack of verbal commands. Her voice cracked slightly at the end. She paused, then added, "The kid is 15. Across town, Marcus Denton, the journalist, was sitting with a laptop open, digging through archived articles and officer misconduct records. As he sifted through public complaint databases and Reddit threads, a trend started to emerge. Officer Whitman had a history. Multiple complaints over a 10-year period, all dismissed. 3 involving minors. 2 involving black teens. 1 eerily similar to Elijah's case. The name had been redacted, but the complaint noted that the child had also reached into his waistband to retrieve a phone. Marcus called Trina immediately. "You sitting down?" "I haven't stood in 12 hours, so yeah." "Whitman has priors, sealed ones. I found a case from 2017 involving a 14-year-old, nearly identical scenario. Reached into his waistband, baton used, internal affairs buried it." Trina cursed under her breath. "Send me everything, and dig up who buried it. Someone signed off on that." Meanwhile, the department was in full damage control mode. Chief Roman held a tense press conference in front of a sea of flashing cameras and furious community members. He emphasized ongoing investigations, officer suspension with pay, and the usual empty phrases: transparency, accountability, reform. In the crowd stood Raven Daniels, Elijah's older sister. She hadn't spoken to the media yet, but now, with Trina's guidance and fire in her veins, she stepped forward to the nearest microphone as the chief turned to leave. "My brother is 15, she said calmly, her voice amplified across the courtyard. "He plays trumpet in the marching band. He watches Marvel movies. He's never been arrested. And your officers beat him like a grown man for reaching into his pocket." The murmur spread like wildfire. Reporters turned their cameras to her. "And now," Raven continued, "you want to hide behind procedure and silence? Not today. Not this time. You picked the wrong kid." The crowd erupted. That night, the mayor called Chief Roman directly. "Contain this. I don't care how. Get a statement out. Get the mother on camera. Hell, pay for her legal fees if you have to." "We tried," Roman said through gritted teeth. But there's another problem. Her lawyer isn't just some ambulance chaser. She's Trina Caldwell. There was silence on the other end, then a sharp inhale. Caldwell, the one who went head-to-head with the Miami DA, the woman who got the bail reform bill passed in Illinois. Yeah, that Caldwell, the mayor swore. You better fix this before she tears your department apart. But Trina wasn't slowing down. In fact, she was accelerating. She had scheduled meetings with civil rights organizations, filed a civil suit with damning initial evidence, and was pushing for a DOJ investigation. The wheels were turning, but she hadn't told anyone the biggest piece yet. The twist she held close. That she wasn't just Elijah's godmother. She was a former DOJ federal investigator specializing in police misconduct. She had taken a step back from federal work to focus on local justice projects and mentorship. But now she was all in. That evening, Trina walked into Elijah's hospital room with a USB drive in her hand. "I got the school footage," she whispered. Elijah opened his eyes slowly, bruised but aware. "Did it show what happened?" Trina nodded. "It showed everything. You reached in your pocket. You paused, looked confused. You never had a chance to explain, but I'm going to make sure they do." Elijah swallowed hard. "They thought I had a gun." "No," Trina said firmly. "They saw your skin. They saw your hoodie. They didn't see a boy. They saw a threat." He didn't speak, just blinked, eyes brimming with tears. Across town, Marcus received an anonymous email, one line of text and an attachment. The message read, "You didn't get this from me, but they're erasing body cam footage from 2017. The file was encrypted. He stared at it, heart pounding. Then he picked up the phone. "Trina, we have a bombshell, and I think someone on the inside wants to help us light the fuse." This wasn't just about Elijah anymore. It was about every buried complaint, every sealed file, every teen whose name never made the news, and the people who thought they could get away with it. They were about to learn otherwise. The rain came down in sheets as Danielle pulled into the small, gated parking lot behind the Community Legal Aid Center on East 126th Street. The same neighborhood where her nephew had been brutalized now hosted the hub for her counterattack. She sat behind the wheel, engine still humming, watching the drops race each other down the windshield, her knuckles tight on the steering wheel. She hadn't slept much. The images of Miles curled in pain, the blood on his shirt, and the way his voice trembled when he whispered, "I thought they were going to kill me," played on repeat in her mind. Inside, the office buzzed with quiet urgency. Community volunteers typed away, researchers pored over cases, and at the center of it all stood Danielle, commanding, focused, and unrelenting. She wore a simple black turtleneck and dark jeans. Her hair was tied back into a neat bun, her gold-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. Her voice cut through the quiet like a gavel in a courtroom. Every documented complaint, every body cam discrepancy, every sealed case that went suspiciously quiet. "Bring it to my desk," she instructed. Miles sat in the corner, headphones around his neck this time, a bandage still visible under his hoodie. He was quieter now, almost reserved, but his eyes never left his aunt. The once carefree teenager who made beats in his bedroom was now thrust into a war he never asked for. Danielle turned to him, softening. "You okay?" "I will be," Miles replied, voice barely audible. "I just want them to feel what I felt." Danielle nodded. "They will, but we'll do it right, with proof, with strategy." She had already filed an internal affairs complaint, but she knew that would disappear into the void unless the public demanded more. What they needed now was pressure. Public, legal, political. Her first move was to call in favors from her Harvard classmates, now judges, journalists, and policymakers. Some owed her more than one. Others respected her enough to listen. Then came the press conference. Standing in front of the crumbling police precinct where it all began, Danielle faced a forest of microphones. Miles stood beside her, flanked by neighbors, clergy, teachers, and students, faces from a wounded community. "The officers who attacked my nephew claimed they thought he was reaching for a weapon," Danielle began. "What he was reaching for was his phone, to pause the music in his headphones so he could hear their commands, and for that they beat him until he bled." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Flashbulbs popped. "This is not just about Miles," she continued. "This is about every teenager who has been taught to fear the people sworn to protect them. This is about a system that shields its own and silences the rest." Reporters swarmed her afterward. National networks picked it up. Hashtags trended. But backlash came just as fast. The police union issued a statement accusing Danielle of politicizing a lawful stop. Local talk radio called her an agitator. Then came the surveillance footage. Leaked anonymously, it showed Miles, headphones on, unaware of the escalating scene behind him, reaching into his jacket pocket as the officers advanced. The moment the music paused and he turned, he was struck. The baton came down before a word was spoken. It was damning. The footage was sent to Danielle's inbox by a former precinct officer turned whistleblower. "They buried this," the message read. "I couldn't stay silent." Danielle brought it straight to the public. The next evening, she hosted a town hall live stream. Thousands tuned in. She played the clip, pausing it frame by frame, narrating the truth. "They never gave him a chance," she said. "And this wasn't just poor judgment. This was a cover-up. From the moment he hit the ground, they worked to erase their mistake." The comments section exploded with support and threats. Her office phone rang off the hook. Some were from allies, others from anonymous numbers warning her to back off. But Danielle didn't flinch. Instead, she doubled down. She filed a civil suit not just against the officers, but against the department for systemic negligence. She requested an emergency injunction to freeze evidence destruction. She petitioned for federal oversight of the precinct. Then came the real twist. An anonymous envelope arrived at her home. Inside were 3 documents: disciplinary records for the officers involved, a memo from the precinct captain instructing internal affairs to avoid excessive escalation of the incident, and a signed approval from the district attorney to not press charges, despite knowing the video existed. Danielle's hands trembled as she read. "They were all in on it," she muttered. She scanned and filed everything. She was done waiting for the system to fix itself. Back in the legal center, she called her team together. "This just became bigger than Miles," she said. "We're talking about a coordinated effort to suppress truth and protect brutality, and I'm going to make sure every last one of them is held accountable." As she spoke, her phone buzzed, a message from a restricted number. "You're making dangerous enemies, counselor. Walk away while you can." Danielle stared at it, then calmly locked her phone and looked around. "Good," she said aloud. "That means they're scared." And for the first time in weeks, Miles smiled. It wasn't joy, it was fire. The fight was just beginning. Danielle paced the floor of her living room, her bare feet cold against the hardwood. Her mind ran a mile a minute, the envelope still sitting open on her kitchen counter like a loaded weapon. The documents inside proved what she'd suspected all along. The beating of her nephew wasn't a momentary lapse. It was a symptom of a system rotting from the inside out. Across town, the fallout had already begun. The footage had gone viral, and the public outcry was thunderous. Talk shows, podcasts, local papers, even national outlets were picking it up. Teen beaten for wearing headphones. Black attorney exposes police conspiracy. Justice for Miles. The headlines were relentless. But the more traction the case gained, the more dangerous it became. Danielle's phone buzzed again, and this time it was a name she hadn't seen in years. "Clarence Mosley," she murmured, staring at the screen. She answered. "Clarence?" "Danielle, I watched the live stream. You've stirred a hornet's nest. Clarence had been her mentor at law school, once a top investigator for the Justice Department. He was retired now, but still had his ear to the ground. If he was calling, it meant something serious. "You know what you're up against, right?" he said, skipping pleasantries. "I do now." "They're not just going to push back. They're going to bury you if they can. You need leverage, the kind they can't discredit. I've got the leaked documents, the footage, whistleblower testimony." Clarence's voice grew grim. "You need more. You need a name." Danielle's heart stopped. "There's someone inside," Clarence said. "Still active, still scared, but they want to talk. I'll arrange it." 3 days later, Danielle met the contact in a parking garage beneath a crumbling city-owned office building. The man was white, mid-40s, and wore a baseball cap pulled low. "My name's Eric. I'm with IA," he whispered, barely looking at her. He handed her a flash drive. "This is from the precinct's internal records, patrol schedules, incident reports, body cam logs, things that were never entered into evidence." Danielle's fingers curled around the drive. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because I have kids," he said, eyes suddenly glassy. "Because this isn't what I signed up for, and because if I stay quiet, I'm complicit." Back at her office, Danielle loaded the drive onto a secured laptop. The contents were staggering. Dozens of body cam files mislabeled, missing footage logs, and one entry that made her freeze. "Use of force incident involving juvenile male, audio scrubbed, visual tampered." The date matched Miles's assault. Danielle leaned back in her chair. They erased the sound. But even more chilling was the next folder. DA Communications. Inside were emails between the district attorney and the precinct's captain discussing narrative control, with phrases like public optics and minimize collateral exposure. It was a cover-up, coordinated, institutional. Danielle stared at the screen, a mix of rage and grim satisfaction in her chest. This wasn't just about Miles anymore. This was about every black teen who had ever been mistaken for a threat. Every mother who got a call from a hospital instead of a classroom. Every voice that had been silenced, sealed behind closed doors. She stood up and looked out the window. The city moved on as if nothing had happened, as if the system wasn't cracking at the seams. But she wasn't done yet. She called Miles into the room. "I need you to see something," she said. He sat beside her, watching the videos, one after another, some worse than his, some just as bad. "They lied," he whispered. "I know. What happens now?" Danielle's jaw clenched. "We burn it all down." They organized a press conference for the following morning, this time on the steps of the federal courthouse. Danielle stood beside civil rights leaders, former officers, school principals, and survivors of police abuse. Her team had spent the night compiling a 96-page brief documenting every buried complaint and hidden report, with the new evidence front and center. As the crowd gathered, Danielle addressed them with a voice that carried like thunder. "This is no longer a lawsuit," she said. "This is a demand for investigation, for prosecution, for reform." She held up the flash drive. "This drive contains proof that city officials knowingly participated in a conspiracy to silence victims and protect aggressors. And if they won't open an investigation, we'll take it to Washington. We'll take it to the people." The next day, the mayor's office issued a statement claiming full cooperation and announcing a third-party review. But Danielle wasn't buying it. She had the next move planned. While the city scrambled for damage control, she filed a federal civil rights lawsuit, not just against the officers, not just the department, but the entire chain of command up to the DA. They tried to stonewall her in court. They accused her of manufacturing evidence. They attempted to disbar her. But she had one more card left. That night, back in her office, Danielle uploaded all the files to a public cloud and tweeted the link. "If the system won't bring justice, "The truth will," she posted. The file went viral in hours. Journalists swarmed. Law schools began dissecting it. Protests reignited. Politicians were forced to respond. And somewhere in a quiet precinct across town, the officers who beat Miles were pulled from duty. Danielle knew this was just the beginning. But for the first time, the system wasn't just watching. It was cracking. The hearing room buzzed with tension as Danielle Caldwell stepped inside, her heels clicking sharply on the polished marble. Every camera lens followed her. Every journalist held their breath. This wasn't just another legal proceeding. This was a reckoning. It had been a week since she dropped the files. The city had been scrambling ever since. The mayor formed a task force, the police chief issued a blanket statement, and the district attorney refused interviews. But no one could deny the public was done waiting. They wanted blood, or at the very least, truth. Danielle had both. Across the aisle sat Captain Gregory Wells, stone-faced, flanked by two uniformed lawyers. The same man who had once laughed at her nephew's hospital photo, who had dismissed his injuries as miscommunication. Today, he would face the weight of every lie he'd ever approved. Danielle approached the bench. "Your Honor, we are submitting a motion to introduce Exhibit 49, an internal precinct email titled Operation Calm Storm, sent between Captain Wells and Assistant DA Curtis Holloway." Wells shifted, slight, nervous. The judge reviewed the document silently, eyes narrowing. This document outlines a coordinated effort to suppress use-of-force reports and manipulate civilian complaint records. Danielle continued, her voice cold and even. It also shows that the officers who beat Miles Coleman were reassigned to desk duty, not because of pending review, but to limit media exposure until the storm passes. That storm was my nephew's broken jaw. Gasps filled the courtroom. Wells' lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we request that this evidence be excluded due to questionable chain of custody." But the judge held up a hand. "Sit down. Miss Caldwell, continue." Danielle turned to the gallery. "We also have a sworn affidavit from Officer Eric Vance, Internal Affairs, who confirms that Captain Wells ordered bodycam audio stripped and written reports falsified. Officer Vance is in this courtroom today." Heads turned as Vance slowly rose from the back pew, a man torn between duty and decency. His hands trembled slightly, but his jaw was set. Danielle called him to the stand. "What made you come forward?" she asked. Vance didn't hesitate. "Because I have two sons. And I couldn't live with myself knowing I helped cover up what happened to that boy." "What exactly were you told to do?" "I was instructed to tag the footage from Officer Hendricks and Officer Mallory as corrupted during upload. I was told to scrub the timestamp from dispatch logs, and I was told, word for word, if this thing gets out, it'll make George Floyd look like a training video." Dead silence. Danielle nodded. "No further questions." On cross, the defense tried to undermine Vance, brought up his drinking habits, his previous suspension. But the jury wasn't buying it. They were watching Wells sweat through his shirt, not Vance's trembling hands. When court recessed, the media exploded. Danielle didn't do interviews. She didn't need to. Her work spoke for itself. But back in her office, her phone rang with a blocked number. She answered. "I hope you know what you're doing," the voice said. "Who is this?" "You've rattled the right cages, the kind that fight back in the dark." Danielle didn't flinch. "I don't scare easy." "You should. This goes higher than Wells." Then the line went dead. That night, Miles had trouble sleeping. Danielle found him staring at the ceiling in the guest bedroom. "You okay, kiddo?" she asked softly. "Not really," he replied. "Everyone keeps talking about me like I'm some victim they're fighting for. But they don't know me. I'm just a kid who wore headphones and got beat up." Danielle sat beside him. "You're more than that. You're the line they crossed, And we're not fighting for a symbol. We're fighting for your right to exist in peace." Miles looked at her, his eyes glistening. "Does it get better?" Danielle nodded slowly. "Only if we keep pushing, even when it hurts." The next morning, Danielle's office was broken into, files scattered, drawers pulled out, but nothing taken. Only one file folder opened and left in the center of the desk. A photo of Miles with the word "enough" scribbled across it in red marker. Her breath caught. She called Marcus, a family friend and former FBI agent. "You're being intimidated," he said bluntly. "They're baiting you." "Well, they picked the wrong target." Marcus paused. "You sure you want to go to the DOJ with this? It's war." Danielle stared out the window at the city she once loved. "It's already war. I'm just done pretending it isn't." That afternoon, she sent a formal request for federal investigation to the U.S. Department of Justice, attaching the entire case file, evidence log, and a signed affidavit from Eric Vance. She CC'd every news outlet and civil rights group from the ACLU to the Innocence Project. By evening, Twitter was trending. "Justice for Miles is Caldwell v's system said I'd burn it down." Captain Wells tried to make a statement the next morning, but his own precinct had been swarmed by protesters. 2 officers turned in their badges. One leaked a private group chat of racist memes circulated within the department. Danielle didn't even need to lift a finger for that one. It was snowballing now. Then came the plot twist. In a closed-door emergency meeting, DA Curtis Holloway resigned, quietly. No apology, no explanation. But the email records made it clear. He had authorized the suppression. He had known everything. Danielle smiled at the news. But it wasn't enough. She filed a civil suit not only against the police department and DA's office, but also against the city council members who ignored past warnings and the contractors responsible for destroying public complaint kiosks in black neighborhoods. She was going after the whole ecosystem of silence, and just when she thought she'd seen it all, a mother showed up at her office. "My son was beaten by Officer Hendricks 2 years ago," she said, holding a photo of a boy with a swollen eye. "No one believed us." Danielle took the photo gently. "I believe you now, because this wasn't just about Miles anymore. It was about every life swept under the rug. And Danielle Caldwell wasn't sweeping anything anymore. She was flipping the whole damn table. The city buzzed with something volatile: anger, urgency, anticipation. After Danielle Caldwell's explosive civil suit filing and the resignation of DA Curtis Holloway, the media had descended on Baltimore like bees to blood. Danielle's name was on every local headline, but she wasn't chasing fame. She was chasing a reckoning, and that reckoning was now one step closer. Danielle stood in the center of a packed town hall meeting, her hands resting firmly on the podium. Cameras lined the back walls. Live streams flickered across YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter. But her focus was on the front row. Miles, his mother Tasha, Eric Vance, and dozens of families who had long believed their voices didn't matter. "This system isn't broken," Danielle began, her voice clear and biting. "It was built this way, but we're not here to fix it. We're here to dismantle it." The room erupted in cheers, fists raised in the air. Behind the scenes, however, Captain Gregory Wells was spiraling. His office, once a fortress of arrogance, had become a bunker. His calls went unanswered. The city's fraternal order of police had distanced itself. Someone from Internal Affairs had leaked documents proving his role in the suppression of multiple misconduct investigations, and now a subpoena had landed on his desk. Still, Wells wasn't ready to fold. He had allies in high places. He picked up a burner phone and made a call. "We need to hit her where it hurts, something that will silence her before this goes any further." "What do you have in mind?" came the gruff voice on the other end. "Her nephew. Dig into his record, his school, his medical files. Find something, anything. I want her discredited. I want her scared. That night, Miles received a text from an unknown number. It simply read, "You think you're a victim? Check your name in the system." Attached was a blurry PDF of a juvenile file, one Danielle had fought to seal when Miles was 12, after an incident involving a broken car window. It was dismissed, sealed, and long buried, yet somehow it had reappeared. Miles panicked. "Auntie, I think they're coming for me." Danielle read the message, fury bubbling in her chest. "They're trying to smear you. They want me to back off." He lowered his head. What if it works? What if people believe them? Danielle gently lifted his chin. "Then we fight louder. If they want to expose your past, we expose theirs. All of it." The next morning, she went live on national television. "They're threatening my family now. They leaked a sealed juvenile file on my nephew, a boy who was assaulted by officers for wearing headphones. Let me be clear. If they want a war, they're getting one, and this time I'm naming names." That same day, new evidence emerged. Officer Hendricks, one of the officers who beat Miles, had previously been investigated for assaulting a teenage boy in West Baltimore, an investigation that mysteriously disappeared mid-review. But the real twist came when Danielle's paralegal, Jamal, unearthed something bigger. "I found something in the internal email archives," he said, breathless. "It's not just Wells, it's an entire pattern. Complaints filed by citizens from specific zip codes, mostly black and low income, were systematically purged from the database." He handed Danielle a flash drive. These weren't glitches. They were flagged by a program called Silent Filter, developed by a third-party tech contractor named Rhombus Solutions. Danielle's mind raced. Wait, Rhombus? They have a citywide data contract. If they're involved... She didn't finish. She didn't have to. She called Marcus, the former FBI agent. "We need to talk," she said. An hour later, in a coffee shop downtown, Marcus laid it out. Rhombus has ties to several municipal governments. They sell public safety optimization tools, but there have been whispers they're helping agencies hide dirty data. Danielle tapped her fingers on the table. "I need proof, not rumors." Marcus nodded. "Then we go to someone who knows how to follow digital footprints." Enter Zoya Patel, a cybersecurity expert and whistleblower advocate. Within 48 hours, she decrypted the program's backend. Her conclusion? Damning. Silent Filter doesn't just purge civilian complaints. It uses racial profiling to prioritize which entries get flagged for deletion. It's algorithmic suppression built into the city's law enforcement framework. Danielle stared at the code. Jesus, this isn't corruption. This is architecture. And so she filed an amendment to her lawsuit, naming Rhombus Solutions as a co-defendant, citing racial targeting through data manipulation, and demanding a federal tech audit. As she walked out of the courthouse, a reporter shoved a mic in her face. "Danielle, you're taking on a police captain, a tech contractor, and a political machine. Do you really think you can win?" She looked directly into the camera. "I'm not here to win. I'm here to break the damn game." That night, anonymous threats flooded her inbox. Emails, phone calls, fake Yelp reviews trashing her law firm. Even a note slid under her door. "Back off or bury your nephew next." She posted the note publicly. And the response? Overwhelming. Celebrities, civil rights leaders, legal organizations nationwide rallied to her side. A GoFundMe for Miles's college fund hit $500,000 in 48 hours. People began spray painting her name on murals. Caldwell wasn't just a lawyer anymore. She was a movement. But with the stakes rising, so did the danger. Captain Wells, cornered and desperate, decided to make one last move. He called in a favor from a city councilman whose campaign he helped fund years ago. "I need a favor. We pull the plug on Caldwell's suit. Emergency vote. Deny funding for the court process. Delay until she drowns in paperwork. The councilman hesitated. That's political suicide now. You owe me. But the councilman didn't respond. He hung up. Wells didn't know it, but his world had already collapsed. Danielle Caldwell wasn't just coming for him anymore. She was coming for the entire system. And by morning, that system would begin to crumble. The courtroom was electric. Cameras flashed, murmurs rippled through the crowd, and the judge's gavel barely held back the chaos. Olivia stood tall, her posture unshaken, her eyes locked on Chief Ramsey, who sat pale and sweating behind the defense table. He had never expected it to go this far. Never expected the woman who confronted him at the hospital, who had quietly collected evidence for months, who had faced media smears and city backlash, would bring him to trial, let alone win. But here she was, and he was about to lose everything. The prosecutor turned toward the jury. We have proved, beyond any reasonable doubt, that Chief Ramsey not only covered up the unlawful beating of Miles Johnson, but actively ordered falsification of reports, tampered with evidence, and lied under oath. Ramsey's attorney, a man once smug and untouchable, now fumbled through papers, desperate to find a crack in the wall Olivia had built. Judge Avery cleared her throat. Has the jury reached a verdict? The forewoman rose. We have, Your Honor. On all counts, we find the defendant guilty. A collective gasp filled the room. Ramsey's face collapsed, like a mask melting off. Olivia closed her eyes, not in celebration, but in quiet acknowledgement of justice finally served. Outside, the media waited. Olivia stepped out into the blinding sun, where dozens of protesters, young, old, black, white, held up signs that read, "Justice for Miles" and "Accountability Now." Miles was there too, still healing, still quiet. When he saw Olivia, he gave her a small nod. It was all she needed. Later that night, Olivia sat in front of her modest laptop. She opened the recording software and hit record. "My name is Olivia Grant," she began. "Today, a corrupt police chief was convicted. But this story isn't about me. It's about a 15-year-old boy who was nearly killed for reaching into his pocket to pause his music. It's about a system that protects power instead of people. And it's about what happens when we fight back, together." She paused, looked directly into the lens. "If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you love or someone you've lost, I ask you to share it, hit the like button, and subscribe to the channel. Let's make sure stories like this one reach the people who need to hear them most." Her voice lowered, more personal. "We're building something here, a world where kids like Miles can walk home without fear. If you believe in that world too, stick with us. We've only just begun." She clicked the camera off, and with that, the system would never be the same again.